Canada is contemplating an unprecedented response to President Donald Trump's looming tariffs on Canadian goods, which are set to take effect tomorrow, March 3rd. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has made it clear that his government is prepared to retaliate forcefully, even considering the drastic measure of cutting off electricity exports to key U.S. states. The threat comes as tensions mount over Trump's plan to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian exports and a 10% levy on energy, a move that could have devastating effects on industries such as auto manufacturing, steel production, and retail prices. During a press conference on Monday, Ford reiterated his stance, warning that Ontario could halt the flow of electricity to states like New York, Michigan, and Minnesota, which heavily rely on energy imports from the province. If they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do anything, including cutting off their energy, with a smile on my face, he declared. His aggressive rhetoric underscores the gravity of the situation, as Canada braces for the potential economic fallout of Trump's trade policies. Beyond energy exports, Ontario is also considering other retaliatory measures. Ford hinted at implementing a surcharge on each megawatt of electricity sold to the U.S., effectively raising costs for American consumers and businesses. He also threatened to terminate a $100 million deal with Elon Musk's Starlink internet company and ordered the removal of all American alcohol from the Liquor Control Board of Ontario stores should the U.S. move forward with the tariffs. The economic implications of Trump's tariffs are profound, with many analysts warning of job losses and rising costs in Canada. Ontario, as the country's industrial hub, is particularly vulnerable. The Progressive Conservative government has already earmarked over $40 billion in potential economic relief, including a $5 billion Protect Ontario account, tax deferrals, payroll subsidies, and direct support to municipalities. This preemptive economic shield highlights the gravity of the trade dispute and the potential repercussions for workers and businesses across the province. Despite these preparations, Ford acknowledged the uncertainty surrounding Trump's next moves, stating, "We don't know what's coming tomorrow. I'm not even sure President Trump knows what's coming tomorrow." This sentiment reflects the unpredictable nature of U.S. actions under Trump, as businesses on both sides of the border anxiously await the official implementation of the tariffs. The federal government has also vowed to respond in kind, with Ford expressing his support for a dollar-for-dollar retaliation strategy, mirroring any U.S. trade actions with equal countermeasures. While Ford stopped short of announcing specific retaliatory tariffs at the provincial level, his willingness to take drastic steps signals that Ontario is prepared to escalate if necessary. With less than 24 hours before the tariffs are expected to take effect, all eyes are on Washington and Ottawa. If Trump follows through with his threat, Canada's response could set the stage for a new era of trade hostilities between the two historically close allies. Whether this standoff leads to negotiations or further economic conflict remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: Canada is not willing to back down without a fight. As one of the world's largest economies, the United States remains highly dependent on imports across various critical sectors that sustain its growth and stability. From energy and raw materials to food, beverages, and skilled labor, international trade has long been a cornerstone of the U.S. economic framework. However, during Donald Trump's presidency and his America First agenda, these trade relationships came under significant strain. Through the imposition of tariffs and trade restrictions on both allies and competitors, including Canada, the European Union, and China, the administration aimed to redirect trade in favor of domestic industries. Though this policy seeks to safeguard American manufacturing and aligns with nationalist sentiment, it often disregards the intricate global supply chains built over decades of globalization. The United States imports not only consumer goods but also essential resources like crude oil, rare earth minerals, electricity, and other raw materials crucial for industrial and technological progress. Additionally, international talent plays a pivotal role in maintaining the country's competitive advantage in innovation and research. In response to the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, Canada is weighing countermeasures that go beyond traditional trade penalties. One major action under consideration is restricting oil and electricity exports to the United States, which could disrupt key energy supply chains. Furthermore, Canada is reviewing potential restrictions on other crucial exports, including rare earth elements and natural gas, which are essential to sectors ranging from defense to renewable energy. In 2024 alone, the United States imported approximately $129.85 billion worth of energy from Canada, making it the country's largest supplier. This included 1.46 billion barrels of crude oil valued at $116.8 billion and 2,701 billion cubic feet of natural gas worth $10.8 billion. The United States also imported 37 terawatt-hours of electricity valued at $1.85 billion and 10 million pounds of uranium worth $0.4 billion. Crude oil represented the largest share of these imports, highlighting Canada's pivotal role in ensuring U.S. energy security. Canada is actively pursuing diversification in its oil export markets, particularly focusing on the Far East, including China and Japan, to reduce its heavy reliance on the U.S. market. This strategic pivot has been accelerated by recent trade disputes and proposed U.S. policies. The completion of the Trans Mountain Expansion, or TMX pipeline in early 2024, has been instrumental in redirecting Canadian crude oil to Asian markets. This pipeline connects Alberta to the Pacific coast, enabling shipments to countries such as China, Japan, and South Korea. In September 2024, major refiners in Japan and South Korea, along with a refinery in Brunei, acquired their first shipments of Canadian crude via the TMX pipeline. Alberta's energy exports to China have surged significantly. In the first 11 months of 2024, Alberta's energy product exports to China totaled $2 billion, a five-fold increase from the same period in 2023. This surge was largely fueled by crude oil exports, which jumped from $0 to $1.8 billion over this period. Japan has also become a vital market for Canadian energy exports. In February 2025, Alberta's Minister of Environment and Protected Areas, Rebecca Schultz, emphasized the importance of expanding into the Japanese market amid U.S. tariff threats. This initiative aims to secure new destinations for Alberta's natural gas and crude oil. Although the United States is a major energy producer, it still relies on imports to balance regional and industrial demand. These imports include crude oil, natural gas, petroleum products, coal, electricity, and uranium. Crude oil remains the largest component of U.S. energy imports, averaging 6.1 million barrels per day in 2024. Canada provided over 4 million barrels per day, 67% of total U.S. imports, via pipelines such as Keystone XL and Enbridge Mainline. Despite rising domestic production, crude imports remain vital for refineries designed to process heavier oil grades. The U.S. imported 8.5 billion cubic feet per day of natural gas, with Canada supplying 7.4 billion cubic feet per day, primarily to the Midwest and Northeast. These imports are essential for winter heating and industrial power generation. In 2024, the U.S. imported 38.92 terawatt-hours of electricity, with Canada supplying 95% of that total. States such as New York and Michigan rely heavily on Canadian power, particularly during peak demand seasons. Coal imports were minimal, totaling just 4 million short tons in 2024. Colombia, Indonesia, and Canada served as the primary suppliers, with imports primarily fulfilling niche demands in steel production. The U.S. imported 50 million pounds of uranium in 2024 to fuel its 93 nuclear reactors. Canada supplied 20%, while imports from Russia declined significantly due to new sanctions. The potential disruption of these imports underscores Canada's crucial role in U.S. energy security, making retaliatory measures highly consequential. Canada is also considering strategic countermeasures in response to proposed U.S. tariffs, with one of the most impactful being a reduction or halt in oil exports. Such a move would carry widespread ramifications. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has taken a more balanced approach, advocating for a measured response. The federal government is weighing alternative retaliatory measures, including targeted tariffs on American imports such as steel, aluminum, and orange juice. Pierre Poilievre, leader of Canada's Conservative Party and a leading candidate to succeed Trudeau, has vowed to retaliate against the U.S. should the tariffs be enacted. He argued that such trade restrictions would be damaging to both nations and pledged to implement targeted and strategic countermeasures affecting the U.S. economy if necessary. Poilievre has also emphasized the need for diversifying Canada's trade relationships to mitigate the impact of U.S. tariffs. Let's take a quick pause. If you've enjoyed the video so far, could we ask a small favor? Hitting the like button helps us reach a broader audience, and sharing your thoughts or feedback in the comments makes an even bigger impact. Thank you for watching. Now, let's dive back in. Economic and political consequences. Halting or reducing oil exports to the United States would have significant economic and political repercussions for both nations. For the United States, this action would disrupt energy supply chains and increase costs for consumers. For the U.S., this action would disrupt energy supply chains and increase costs for consumers. States such as Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, heavily reliant on Canadian crude oil and electricity, would experience supply shortages and rising energy costs. These disruptions could ripple throughout the U.S. economy, particularly affecting industries dependent on stable and affordable energy. For Canada, the economic effects would be equally severe. Crude oil exports represent a major revenue stream, and any substantial cut could slow GDP growth, increase unemployment in the energy sector, and place pressure on provincial budgets. Alberta, as the country's top oil-producing province, would bear the brunt of these impacts, potentially intensifying tensions between provincial and federal governments. An economic downturn could also drive inflation higher, further complicating Canada's fiscal outlook. Politically, restricting oil exports could escalate tensions between Canada and the U.S., straining diplomatic ties and undermining the USMCA trade agreement. This could provoke countermeasures from Washington, exacerbating the trade dispute and diminishing prospects for a negotiated resolution. Canada's potential decision to limit electricity exports to the U.S. carries major economic and consumer implications, emphasizing the interconnected nature of the two nations' energy markets. Canada remains one of the largest electricity suppliers to the U.S., with exports facilitated through an integrated grid system. Any disruption to this network would have widespread consequences, impacting multiple sectors of the U.S. economy. Electricity imports from Canada are essential for grid stability and meeting demand in regions such as the Midwest and Northeast. A reduction or halt in these exports could lead to severe supply shortages, forcing the U.S. to rely on more expensive domestic or alternative sources, driving up electricity prices. This increase in energy costs would impact industries that depend on affordable power, including manufacturing, agriculture, and technology, potentially hampering productivity and economic growth. Additionally, disruptions in Canadian electricity imports would exacerbate existing U.S. energy challenges, such as outdated infrastructure and seasonal demand fluctuations. States like New York, Minnesota, and Michigan, which rely heavily on Canadian electricity, could experience power shortages and surging costs. This would likely slow economic activity, reduce investment, and heighten the risk of job losses in industries requiring stable, low-cost energy. On a broader scale, trade disruptions could strain U.S.-Canada relations, forcing the U.S. to seek alternative energy arrangements and triggering further retaliatory actions. Given that total bilateral trade between the two nations reached approximately $1.1 trillion in 2023, prolonged escalations could jeopardize long-term economic cooperation and mutual benefits. For American consumers, rising electricity costs could lead to higher household energy bills, adding financial strain for families already grappling with inflation and high living expenses. These increases would be particularly burdensome during peak seasons, such as summer and winter, when energy consumption spikes. Furthermore, limited access to Canadian electricity could lead to greater grid instability and an increased likelihood of power outages, disrupting essential services and everyday life. In extreme cases, energy shortages could heighten public health risks, especially during harsh weather conditions when stable electricity supply is crucial for heating and cooling. The ripple effects on consumer goods and services would also be significant. Higher electricity costs would inevitably translate to increased production costs across industries, from food processing to industrial manufacturing, further eroding consumer purchasing power and potentially slowing overall economic activity. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching this video. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today. If our content resonated with you or sparked inspiration, please Please consider expressing your support by liking it and subscribing to stay connected with our community. Your support holds immense value for us. You can watch another video of our channel, which is now on the screen.